The gavel cracked like thunder against the hardwood, sharp and commanding, silencing the restless murmurs that filled the Brookston County Courthouse. Judge William Halverson leaned forward from the high bench, his eyes narrowing at the young man standing at the defense table. He didn't look like a lawyer. He didn't even look old enough to drive. His suit jacket was a size too big, his tie slightly crooked, but his stance was steady. "Let me get this straight," Halverson said, the faintest curl of amusement tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You're telling this court you will be representing yourself in a felony case at 17 years old?" The boy, Elijah Brooks, nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." A ripple of laughter rolled through the gallery, and even the prosecutor smirked, exchanging a glance with his co-counsel. Halverson tapped his pen against the file in front of him. "Well," he drawled, "this should be entertaining. A week earlier, Elijah hadn't been wearing a suit. He'd been in a faded T-shirt and jean, lying on his bed, listening to hum of traffic outside the cracked window of his apartment, when the pounding on the door came. It wasn't a polite knock of a neighbor. It was a hard, rapid thump of authority. His mother's voice called from the kitchen, startled, "Who is it?" Before he could answer, the door burst open and 2 police officers stormed in, hands on their weapon. "Elijah Brooks," one barked. "Yeah, what's going on?" He didn't get an answer before cold metal cuffs closed around his wrist. The room spun as they told him he was under arrest for armed robbery. Armed robbery? He'd never even held a gun. The hallway filled with neighbors' faces peeking from behind doors, eyes wide, whispering. By the time they shoved him into the back of the squad car, Elijah knew 2 things. 1, this was a mistake. And 2, in Brookston, mistakes like this didn't always get fixed. The holding cell was small and smelled faintly of bleach and old sweat. Elijah sat on the bench, his mind churning. Hours passed before the guard finally told him his mother was waiting in the visitor's room. She looked smaller than he remembered, sitting behind that scratched plexiglass, her hands gripping the phone so tightly her knuckles whitened. "Baby," she said, her voice trembling, "they're saying you robbed a pharmacy. Said you had a weapon." "I didn't, Mama," Elijah said. "I swear." "I know," she whispered, "but they're talking about a plea deal. 15 years if you just say you did it. They're calling it mercy." Elijah felt his chest tighten. 15 years. He'd be 32 by the time he got out. If he got out at all. "Mama, I think I can fight this." She shook her head. "We don't have money for a lawyer." Elijah leaned closer to the glass. "I'll be my own lawyer." At first, she thought he was joking. Then she saw the fire in his eyes and remembered the years he'd spent in the public library, hunched over thick law books, while other kids were playing ball. He'd been doing that since he was 13, fascinated by courtroom dramas and obsessed with reading actual case files. "Elijah," she began, her voice breaking, "they won't take you seriously." "I don't need them to take me serious," he said. "I need them to take the truth seriously." The week before his hearing, Elijah became a fixture at the county library. He spread legal textbooks, police conduct manuals, and trial transcripts across the table, scribbling notes until closing time. He mapped the pharmacy's layout from memory, marked every contradiction in the witness statements, and memorized the county's own rules on probable cause. When the public defender assigned to him arrived to prepare his case, Elijah listened politely before sliding the file back across the table. "I'm going to represent myself," he said. The man blinked, then laughed. "You're serious? This is a felony case, son." Elijah didn't flinch. "I'm serious, and I'm ready." The defender shook his head. "The rules aren't the problem. The people are." Elijah said nothing. He already knew that. Now, standing in the courtroom, Elijah faced those people. Judge Halverson's eyes glinted with a mixture of irritation and curiosity. "All right, Mr. Brooks," the judge said, "you want to play lawyer? Let's see how you handle the prosecution's first witness." Officer McCoy took the stand, his badge gleaming, his voice steady as he described the call he received, the suspect description, and the arrest. The prosecutor led him through the story like a well-rehearsed dance. To anyone listening casually, it sounded solid, but Elijah wasn't listening casually. When it was his turn to cross-examine, Elijah walked to the front slowly, legal pad in hand. "Officer McCoy," he began, his voice calm, "you said the suspect matched my description?" "That's correct," McCoy replied. "Could you read that description from your report?" McCoy flipped the page. "Male, approximately 6 feet tall, wearing a black hoodie and jean." Elijah nodded. "How tall am I, officer?" 5'7", McCoy admitted. "And what was I wearing when you stopped me?" "White T-shirt, khaki pant." A murmur rippled through the gallery. Elijah let the silence stretch before speaking again. "So, just to be clear, you arrested a man 5 inches shorter than your description, wearing completely different clothes, and claimed he matched your suspect." McCoy shifted in his seat. "The description was close enough at the time," he muttered. Elijah glanced at the jury box. "Close enough. Thank you." Officer, no further question. By the time Elijah sat down, the smirks were gone. Even Judge Halverson was watching him differently now, pen paused above his notepad. The prosecutor straightened his tie and rose from his seat, the edge in his voice sharper than before. Your Honor, we'd like to call our next witness. Miss Carrie Dunlop, a woman in her late 40s, took the stand, clutching her purse as though someone might snatch it away. She glanced once at Elijah before fixing her eyes on the prosecutor. Ms. Dunlop, he began warmly, do you remember the night of March 12th? She nodded. Yes, I was working the register at Carter's Pharmacy. And did you see the man who robbed you? She hesitated, then pointed across the courtroom. It was him. Gasps flitted through the air. The prosecutor gave a satisfied smile. Let the record show the witness has identified the defendant. When it was Elijah's turn, he approached slowly, his legal pad tucked under his arm. Ms. Dunlop, he said gently, you just told this court you saw me that night. How sure are you? She frowned. 100%. Elijah took a breath. How many customers came into the store that day? She blinked. I don't know. Maybe 50, maybe 100? And how long did you see the man's face during robbery? Maybe a few seconds, she admitted. Elijah nodded. And in those few seconds, were you also watching the gun? Well, yes, So your attention was divided between my face and a weapon? She swallowed. I guess so. Elijah stepped closer, his voice still calm. Are you aware, Ms. Dunlop, that studies show stress and fear can distort memory? That what we think we saw might not be exactly what happened? She shifted uncomfortably. I've heard that. No further questions, Your Honor. Judge Halverson studied the boy for a moment, something unreadable in his eyes. The prosecutor, however, was less composed now. He flipped pages in his notes, as though trying to find his rhythm again. The next witness was a crime scene analyst, a man in a crisp shirt with a badge clipped to his belt. He spoke about the fingerprint analysis, the lack of print on the gun found near the crime scene, and how absence of evidence does not mean absence of guilt. Elijah listened, then rose for his cross-examination. Mr. Davis, you testified that no fingerprints matching mine were found on the weapon, correct? Correct. And no DNA evidence tying me to the crime was recovered? Correct. And the surveillance footage from the store, does it clearly show my face? Davis hesitated. Not clearly, no. The camera was angled poorly. Elijah tilted his head. So, to summarize, there is no physical evidence placing me at the scene? Davis shifted. That's correct. A low murmur rippled through the room again. Elijah glanced at the jury. He didn't stare too long, but just enough to let the weight of that fact settle. By the third day of the trial, the mood in the courtroom had shifted. The laughter from the first morning was gone. Even the prosecutor had stopped smirking. Elijah's cross-examinations had been sharp, but it was his own testimony that would be the most dangerous moment. When he took the stand, the prosecutor wasted no time trying to rattle him. Mr. Brooks, he began, isn't it true you've had trouble with the law before? Elijah looked him in the eye. When I was 14, I was stopped for walking home with a bag of groceries. They said I matched the suspect description. They let me go when they realized I wasn't the one. I've never been charged with crime before now. The prosecutor's lips tightened. And you expect this jury to believe you just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time? Elijah's voice stayed level. I expect them to believe the evidence or the lack of it. The jury watched him closely. They saw the steel in his voice, the way he never raised it, but never wavered either. They saw his mother sitting in the back row, hands clasped in silent prayer. They saw a boy who should have been thinking about college applications, not prison sentences. When closing arguments came, the prosecutor paced the floor, painting Elijah as reckless, dangerous, and lucky enough to have covered his tracks. He ended with, justice must be served, and that means holding Elijah Brooks accountable. Then it was Elijah's turn. He stood in front of the jury, hands clasped loosely, his voice soft but steady. I'm 17. I've spent the last week defending myself because I couldn't afford a lawyer. They told me to take a plea deal for something I didn't do, and I said no. They told me the system would eat me alive, and maybe it will, but not today. Not if you see what's in front of you. He gestured toward the prosecution's table. No fingerprint, no DNA, no clear video. A witness who saw me for seconds while looking down the barrel of a gun. An officer who arrested someone who didn't even match the description. If that's enough to send me to prison for 15 years, then none of us are safe. He paused, his gaze sweeping the jury box. Don't just think about me. Think about the next person who gets misidentified. Think about the next mother who has to watch her child walk into a courtroom in shackles. This isn't just my fight, it's ours. The courtroom was silent when he sat down. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they filed back in, Elijah's heart pounded so hard he could feel it in his fingertip. The foreman stood. We, the jury, find defendant not guilty. The sound that followed wasn't just relief. It was release. His mother sobbed into her hand. Elijah closed his eyes for a long moment before looking toward the bench. Judge Halverson was watching him, not with amusement now, but with something like respect. "Mr. Brooks," he said quietly, "you've done what most trained attorneys can't. I hope you use that gift." Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed him, microphones flashing. Someone asked if he'd ever thought about becoming a lawyer. Elijah smiled faintly. "I think I already am one."